March 15, 2021, Westchester County, New York. Dr. Marcus Wellington, a respected 62-year-old orthopedic surgeon, is preparing what he believes will be his wife's final dinner. He's carefully selected the wine, set the table with their best china, and placed a single red rose as centerpiece. To anyone watching, this would look like a romantic gesture from a devoted husband, but appearances can be deadly. Hidden in that wine glass is a lethal dose of digitalis, a heart medication that Marcus plans to use to murder his wife of 34 years. He spent months crafting the perfect plan, believing his medical expertise makes him untouchable. The motive? A staggering $2 million fortune and the freedom to start a new life with his younger mistress. Vivian Wellington, 68 years old, enters the dining room with her usual elegant grace. She's built their multi-million-dollar empire through shrewd investments and careful financial planning. Tonight, she's wearing her favorite blue dress, the one Marcus complimented on their first date decades ago. As Marcus hands her the poisoned wine, she looks directly into his eyes and says, "Thank you for everything, darling. I hope you get exactly what you deserve." Those words would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life, because what he didn't know was that Vivian had been planning her own game for months. She had uncovered his affair, discovered his murder plot, and prepared a counter-strategy that would leave him destroyed in ways he never imagined. This is the story of how greed and betrayal led a respected doctor to plot his wife's murder, and how one woman's brilliant mind turned the tables in the most spectacular way possible. But before we reveal how Vivian outsmarted a killer, let's go back to where it all began. To understand how a marriage can transform into a murder plot, we need to meet the players in this deadly game. Dr. Marcus Wellington seemed to have it all. At 62, he was Westchester County's most sought-after orthopedic surgeon, commanding fees that most people only dream about. His colonial mansion sat on 3 acres of manicured grounds, complete with a pool tennis court, and gardens that required a full-time groundskeeper. Patients trusted him with their most delicate surgeries, colleagues respected his expertise, and the community saw him as a pillar of success. But here's the cruel irony that should make every viewer pause. Marcus had dedicated his entire career to healing people, to preserving life, to helping patients walk again after devastating injuries. Yet this same man would eventually use his medical knowledge to plan the most intimate betrayal possible, the murder of his own wife. How does a healer become a killer? How does someone who takes an oath to do no harm rationalize poisoning the woman who stood by him for over 3 decades? Vivian Wellington was the architect of everything Marcus claimed as his own success. While he performed surgeries, she performed financial miracles. A former hospital administrator with a razor-sharp mind for investments, Vivian had taken Marcus's substantial income and transformed it into a fortune worth over $2 million. She negotiated his contracts, managed their portfolios, and built the wealth that funded their luxurious lifestyle. At 68, Vivian maintained the poise and elegance that had first attracted Marcus 40 years earlier. She volunteered at local charities, hosted dinner parties that were the envy of their social circle, and managed their household with the same precision she had once applied to running hospital departments. But behind Vivian's gracious smile lay a mind that never stopped calculating, never stopped observing, never stopped protecting what she had built. This woman had spent decades making financial decisions that would secure their future, tracking every expense, maximizing every opportunity. She wasn't just Marcus's wife. She was his business partner, his financial advisor, and ultimately, his greatest threat. Their marriage had started with genuine love and shared ambitions. In the early years, they were the perfect team, Marcus healing patients while Vivian healed their financial future. They had weathered the disappointment of being unable to have children, the stress of Marcus's demanding schedule, and the natural cooling that comes with decades of routine. But by 2019, their relationship had become a business arrangement disguised as a marriage. They maintained separate bedrooms, shared meals in silence, and interacted more like polite strangers than intimate partners. Marcus felt trapped by routine, while Vivian felt taken for granted after years of managing everything behind the scenes. Here's what every married person watching this needs to understand. When couples stop communicating, when they start taking each other for granted, when they begin viewing their partner as an obstacle rather than an ally, dangerous thoughts can take root. The tragedy of the Wellington marriage wasn't that it ended, it was that it died slowly, year by year, until Marcus could no longer see Vivian as a person. To him, she had become nothing more than a financial asset, a problem to be solved, an impediment to his happiness. This is the warning sign that every viewer needs to recognize. When your partner stops seeing you as a human being with feelings, dreams, and value beyond what you can provide, you may be in more danger than you realize. Vivian sensed this shift years before Marcus acted on it. She noticed his growing resentment, his increasing selfishness, his tendency to discuss her as if she were a burden rather than a partner. But she also noticed something else, something that would ultimately save her life. She noticed that Marcus had started viewing their marriage as a problem that needed a solution. Gabriella Rossi, the woman who would destroy everything Marcus had built. When Marcus hired Gabriella as his new practice manager in late 2019, he thought he was simply filling a position. At 38, Gabriella possessed the perfect combination of professional competence and personal magnetism that made her impossible to ignore. She had managed medical practices before, understood the complexities of insurance billing, and could handle difficult patients with charm and efficiency. But Gabriella was drowning in debt. Her previous marriage had ended in financial disaster, leaving her with $80,000 in credit card debt and a desperate need for stability. When she researched Marcus Wellington before her interview, she discovered far more than his medical credentials. She found a wealthy, lonely man whose marriage had grown cold. Gabriella's strategy was masterful in its simplicity. She never pursued Marcus directly. Instead, she made herself indispensable to his practice while subtly making him feel valued in ways that Vivian no longer did. "Dr. Wellington," she would say, staying late to review patient files, "I've never worked with someone so dedicated to their patients. Your wife must be so proud of everything you've accomplished." Those words hit Marcus like a drug. When was the last time Vivian had praised his work? When had she last shown interest in his achievements? Within weeks, their professional relationship began shifting. Gabriella would bring Marcus his favorite coffee without being asked. She would compliment his surgical skills, laugh at his jokes, and listen intently when he discussed complex cases. After months of feeling invisible in his own home, Marcus found himself looking forward to work in ways he hadn't felt in years. The affair began with a simple dinner invitation. "Dr. Wellington," Gabriella said one evening as they finished reviewing quarterly reports, "I know a wonderful Italian restaurant. Perhaps we could continue our discussion there." Marcus should have said no. Every moral fiber in his body should have recognized the danger. But loneliness makes people vulnerable to temptation, and Gabriella had identified his weakness with surgical precision. Their first dinner lasted 4 hours. Gabriella listened as Marcus talked about his frustrations with his marriage, his sense of being unappreciated, his fears about growing older without experiencing real passion again. She shared her own struggles with divorce, her financial pressures, her dreams of building something meaningful with someone who truly understood her. By their third dinner, Marcus was completely captivated. Gabriella made him feel alive, desired and important. She praised his intelligence, admired his success, and created an emotional intimacy that had been missing from his marriage for years. But Gabriella's true genius lay in how she gradually introduced the subject of money. She never asked Marcus for financial help directly. Instead, she would mention her struggles casually, allowing him to offer assistance. "I can't afford to get my car repaired," she would say with a sigh. "I might have to take the bus to work for a few weeks." Marcus immediately offered to pay for the repairs. When Gabriella protested, he insisted, saying, "You're too valuable to this practice to worry about transportation." The gifts escalated quickly. Car repairs became designer handbags. Handbags became expensive jewelry. Jewelry became weekend getaways to luxury hotels. Within 6 months, Marcus was spending more on Gabriella than he had spent on Vivian in years. Meanwhile, Vivian began noticing the changes. Marcus started working late more frequently, traveling to medical conferences she had never heard of, and taking phone calls that he would end abruptly when she entered the room. More troubling were the credit card charges, expensive restaurants she had never visited, jewelry stores she had never shopped at, hotels in cities where Marcus claimed to be attending medical seminars. The turning point came during a romantic weekend in the Hamptons. As Marcus and Gabriella walked along the beach, she finally revealed her true intentions. "Marcus," she said, taking his hand, "I've been thinking about our future. We could have such a wonderful life together if we were free to make our own choices." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew. "Vivian has lived her life," Gabriella said softly. "She's 68, Marcus. How many good years does she really have left? But you're still young enough to enjoy everything you've worked for. If something happened to her—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The seed was planted. Marcus felt his world tilt. The woman he had sworn to protect in sickness and health had become, in his mind, the only obstacle to his happiness. The transformation was complete. Dr. Marcus Wellington, healer of broken bones, was now contemplating breaking the most sacred trust of all. What started as a whispered suggestion on a beach would soon become a meticulously planned execution. Marcus Wellington was about to weaponize everything he had learned in medical school. The idea consumed Marcus for weeks after that weekend in the Hamptons. He found himself researching cardiac medications during lunch breaks, reviewing toxicology reports late at night, and studying case files of unexplained heart attacks in elderly patients. His medical expertise, honed over decades of saving lives, was now being turned toward the darkest purpose imaginable. Marcus settled on digitalis, a medication derived from the foxglove plant that had been used to treat heart conditions for centuries. In therapeutic doses, digitalis strengthens the heart's contractions and regulates rhythm. But in larger amounts it becomes a deadly poison that can trigger fatal arrhythmias. The beauty of his plan lay in its medical sophistication. Digitalis occurs naturally in the body at trace levels, making detection extremely difficult, unless investigators know exactly what to look for. Even if traces were found, Marcus could claim that Vivian's existing heart condition required the medication, and he had the medical credentials to make that explanation believable. But Marcus needed more than just the poison. He needed a foolproof delivery system and an airtight alibi. Working with Gabriella, he began crafting the perfect murder scenario. They would stage a romantic dinner at home, Marcus playing the devoted husband trying to rekindle their marriage. He would prepare Vivian's favorite meal, open an expensive bottle of wine, and create an atmosphere of reconciliation that would seem touching to anyone investigating her death. The digitalis would be mixed into the wine. Vivian would drink it willingly, trusting her husband completely. Within hours, she would experience what appeared to be a massive heart attack. Marcus would be at the hospital, treating patients with dozens of witnesses to confirm his presence. Gabriella's role was crucial to the alibi. She would ensure that Marcus was visible at the hospital during the critical time window, creating documentation of his presence, and even arranging for him to be paged by colleagues. If anyone questioned the timing, multiple staff members would remember seeing Dr. Wellington working late that evening. The paper trail was equally important. Marcus began documenting concerns about Vivian's health in his personal notes. He mentioned her fatigue, her occasional chest pains, and her family history of heart disease. He even convinced Vivian to schedule a routine cardiac evaluation, creating medical records that would support the narrative of a woman with declining heart health. Marcus started increasing the dosage of Vivian's existing heart medication gradually, building a documented pattern of escalating treatment. To anyone reviewing her medical history, it would appear that her condition had been deteriorating for months, making her sudden death seem like a tragic but predictable outcome. The timeline became critical. Marcus needed to execute the plan before Vivian's scheduled cardiac tests could reveal that she was actually in excellent health. The window was narrow. He had less than 3 weeks to commit the perfect murder. During this planning phase, Marcus showed a chilling attention to detail. He researched the exact timing of digitalis absorption, calculated the precise dosage needed for a fatal outcome, and even practiced mixing the poison into wine to ensure it would be undetectable by taste or smell. Gabriella encouraged every aspect of the plan. feeding Marcus's rationalization that they were simply accelerating the inevitable. "She's already lived her life," she would remind him. "This way she won't suffer through years of declining health. In a way, you're being merciful." The romantic dinner was scheduled for March 15, 2021. Marcus had arranged for Gabriella to call him away from home on a fabricated medical emergency, giving him the perfect reason to leave immediately after serving the poisoned wine. He would drive to the hospital, establish his presence with colleagues, and wait for the call informing him of his wife's tragic death. Marcus even planned his emotional response. He would be devastated, of course, a grieving widower who had lost his beloved wife despite his best efforts to save her. He practiced the words he would say to police, the tears he would shed for the cameras, and the funeral arrangements he would make. But here's what Marcus didn't know. While he was planning her murder, Vivian was conducting her own investigation. She had already discovered the affair, identified the financial irregularities, and begun documenting his suspicious behavior. More importantly, she had started to suspect that her life was in danger. What would you do in Vivian's situation? If you discovered that your spouse was planning to murder you, would you confront them directly, go to the police, or try to gather more evidence first? Let me know in the comments below. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shock everyone involved. Marcus believed he was the mastermind of the perfect crime, but he was about to learn that he had underestimated the intelligence and determination of the woman he planned to kill. March 15th was approaching fast, and both Marcus and Vivian were preparing for the most important night of their lives. While Marcus believed he was orchestrating the perfect murder, Vivian Wellington was conducting her own investigation that would ultimately save her life and destroy his. It started with the credit card statements. Vivian had always managed their finances with meticulous precision, reviewing every transaction and questioning any unusual expenses. In November 2020, she noticed charges that made no sense. Expensive dinners at restaurants she had never visited, jewelry purchases from stores she had never entered, and hotel bills from cities where Marcus claimed to be attending medical conferences. When she cross-referenced these charges with Marcus's supposed conference schedule, the lies became obvious. The American Orthopedic Association conference he claimed to attend in Boston. It was actually held virtually that year. The surgical symposium in Philadelphia? It had been cancelled due to the pandemic, yet the hotel charges and restaurant bills continued appearing on their statements. Vivian's financial instincts kicked into high gear. She began tracking every unusual expense, creating a detailed spreadsheet that revealed a pattern of deception spanning nearly 18 months. The amounts were staggering, over $60,000 in charges that had nothing to do with their household or Marcus's legitimate medical expenses, but the financial evidence was just the beginning. Vivian noticed behavioral changes that triggered every alarm bell in her experienced mind. Marcus had started password protecting his phone, something he had never done in their entire marriage. He would end calls abruptly when she entered the room, claiming they were patient consultations that occurred at odd hours. Most telling, he had begun asking probing questions about her health, suggesting she might need additional cardiac medications. The turning point came when Vivian discovered that Marcus had been researching life insurance policies and reviewing their will. Late one night, she found his computer still open with browser tabs displaying actuarial tables and articles about sudden cardiac death in elderly women. The pieces began forming a terrifying picture. Rather than confront Marcus directly, Vivian made a decision that would prove to be life-saving. She hired private investigator David Chen. David Chen specialized in matrimonial investigations, but he had never encountered a case where the cheating spouse might be planning murder. When Vivian contacted him in December 2020, she presented her findings with the same analytical precision she had once applied to hospital administration. "I need to know who my husband is seeing," she told Chen during their first meeting. "But more importantly, I need to know if I'm in physical danger." Chen's investigation quickly confirmed Vivian's suspicions. Within 2 weeks, he had identified Gabriella Rossi, documented their affair through surveillance photographs, and traced the financial trail of Marcus's spending. But Chen's most shocking discovery came when he conducted background research on Gabriella. Gabriella's previous marriage had ended under suspicious circumstances. Her first husband had died suddenly of an apparent heart attack at age 52, leaving her as the sole beneficiary of his life insurance policy. While no charges were ever filed, the timing had raised questions among investigators that were never fully resolved. Chen presented this information to Vivian with grave concern. "Mrs. Wellington," he said, "I believe your husband may be planning to harm you. This woman has a history, and the pattern of behavior suggests escalating danger." The evidence was overwhelming. Chen had recorded Marcus and Gabriella discussing their future together, captured photographs of their intimate meetings, and documented the financial fraud that had been occurring for months. But the most damning evidence came from Chen's surveillance of Marcus's recent activities. Marcus had been visiting medical supply companies, researching cardiac medications, and even consulting with a toxicologist under the pretense of a research project. Chen's investigation revealed that Marcus had been building the knowledge base necessary to commit an untraceable murder. Faced with this evidence, Vivian experienced a moment of clarity that would define the rest of her life. The man she had trusted for 34 years was planning to kill her. The person who had sworn to protect her was now her greatest threat. But instead of panic, Vivian felt something unexpected. Cold, calculating anger. "If Marcus wants to play games," she told Chen, "then we're going to play by my rules." Vivian's counter-strategy was brilliant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. She began by quietly modifying their will, adding specific provisions that would make Marcus's life substantially more difficult if she died under suspicious circumstances. She arranged for the bulk of their assets to be transferred to a charitable foundation, with Marcus receiving only a modest survivor's benefit. More importantly, she began gathering evidence of Marcus's planned murder. Working with Chen, she installed hidden cameras throughout their home, focusing particularly on the kitchen and dining room where she suspected Marcus would attempt to poison her. These cameras were professionally installed and completely undetectable. Vivian's most brilliant move involved her medication. She discovered that Marcus had been gradually increasing her heart medication dosage, building a medical record that would support the narrative of declining cardiac health. Working with her personal physician, someone Marcus had never met, she arranged to have her real medications replaced with harmless placebos. If Marcus attempted to poison her, the hidden cameras would record everything. If he tried to claim that her existing heart condition had caused a fatal interaction, the autopsy would reveal that she had no therapeutic levels of any cardiac medication in her system. But Vivian's masterstroke was psychological. She began acting as if she suspected nothing, even going so far as to suggest romantic dinners and special occasions that would give Marcus opportunities to execute his plan. She wanted him to feel confident, to believe that his deception was successful. During this period, Vivian demonstrated lessons that every person in a relationship should remember. First, she trusted her instincts. When something felt wrong, she investigated rather than dismissing her concerns. Second, she maintained financial awareness, recognizing that money often reveals the truth about people's intentions. Third, when she realized she was in danger, she took immediate action to protect herself. The most powerful lesson from Vivian's story is this: knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is survival. She didn't just discover Marcus's plan, she used that knowledge to turn the tables completely. As March 15th approached, Vivian was ready. She had gathered evidence, modified their financial arrangements, and prepared her own surprise for the husband who thought he was smart enough to commit the perfect murder. Marcus believed he was the predator, but he was about to discover that he had become the prey. March 15th, 2021. 6:30 p.m. The stage was set for the most dramatic confrontation in the Wellington marriage. Marcus moved through their kitchen with surgical precision, his hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. He had spent the afternoon reviewing his plan one final time, confirming every detail with Gabriella over encrypted messages. Tonight, he would finally be free. The digitalis sat in a small vial on the counter, its clear liquid appearing as innocent as water. Marcus had calculated the exact dosage, enough to trigger a fatal cardiac event within hours, but not so much that it would be immediately detectable. He had practiced this moment dozens of times, measuring the precise amount needed to dissolve completely in wine without altering the taste or appearance. The dining room looked perfect. Marcus had set the table with their wedding china, lit candles that cast dancing shadows across the walls, and placed a single red rose in the center, a touch that would later be described by investigators as heartbreakingly romantic. The expensive bottle of Bordeaux sat breathing on the sideboard, waiting for its deadly enhancement. At exactly 7:15 p.m., Marcus added the digitalis to Vivian's wine glass. He swirled it gently, watching as the poison integrated seamlessly with the deep red liquid. To anyone observing, it would appear to be nothing more than a husband preparing a romantic evening for his wife. Meanwhile, Vivian was upstairs, preparing for what she knew would be the most important performance of her life. She had chosen her blue dress deliberately, the same one she had worn on their first date 40 years ago. If Marcus was going to attempt to murder her tonight, she would meet that moment with dignity and strength. The hidden cameras were recording everything. David Chen sat in a surveillance van 2 blocks away, monitoring the feeds and coordinating with law enforcement who were positioned nearby. Every word, every gesture, every moment of Marcus's planned execution would be captured in high definition. At 7:45 p.m., Vivian descended the stairs. Marcus felt his heart racing as she entered the dining room, looking elegant and trusting. For a brief moment, guilt flickered across his consciousness. This was the woman who had built their fortune, who had stood by him through decades of challenges, who had never given him reason to doubt her loyalty. But then he thought of Gabriella, of the life they could build together, of the freedom that was now just hours away. The guilt disappeared, replaced by cold determination. "This is lovely, Marcus," Vivian said, admiring the table setting. "What's the special occasion?" "No special occasion," Marcus replied, his voice carefully controlled. "I just thought we should spend more time together. We've been like strangers living in the same house." Marcus poured the wine, his hands steady, as he handed Vivian her glass, the one containing her death sentence. She accepted it with a smile, completely trusting, apparently unaware that she was holding poison. "To us," Marcus said, raising his own glass. "To whatever the future holds." Vivian looked directly into his eyes, her gaze steady and knowing. "To getting exactly what we deserve," she replied. They clinked glasses. Marcus watched intently as Vivian raised the wine to her lips and took a long, deliberate sip. Then another, and another. Within minutes, she had consumed nearly half the glass, more than enough to ensure the outcome Marcus desired. "The wine is excellent," Vivian said, her voice showing no sign of distress. "Where did you find it?" Marcus felt a surge of confidence. The plan was working perfectly. Vivian showed no suspicion, no awareness that she had just consumed a lethal dose of cardiac medication. In a few hours, she would begin experiencing chest pains, difficulty breathing, and eventually cardiac arrest. At 8:30 p.m., Marcus's phone rang, right on schedule. It was Gabriella, calling with the fabricated medical emergency that would summon him to the hospital. "I'm so sorry, darling," Marcus said to Vivian, feigning disappointment. "There's been an accident. Multiple trauma victims are coming in, and they need all available surgeons. I have to go." "Of course," Vivian replied graciously. "Your patients need you. I'll clean up here." Marcus kissed her forehead, a gesture that would haunt him later, and headed for the door. As he reached the threshold, Vivian called out to him. "Marcus?" He turned back, expecting perhaps a final loving word from his wife. Instead, Vivian looked directly at him with eyes that seemed to see straight through his soul. "I hope you get exactly what you deserve tonight." Those words sent a chill down Marcus's spine, but he dismissed the feeling as guilt. Vivian couldn't possibly know what he had done. She was simply expressing love for her devoted husband. Marcus arrived at the hospital at 9:15 p.m., immediately establishing his presence with colleagues and nursing staff. He made sure to be visible, to engage in conversations that would be remembered, to create an ironclad alibi for the critical time period. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed their home number. This was the moment he had been waiting for, Vivian calling for help as the poison took effect. "Marcus!" Vivian's voice came through the phone, but something was wrong. She sounded perfectly calm, completely healthy. "Could you come home, please? There are some people here who would like to speak with you." "People?" Marcus felt confusion creeping in. "What people? Are you feeling all right?" "I'm feeling wonderful," Vivian replied, her voice carrying a tone Marcus had never heard before. "In fact, I've never felt better. The police are here, Marcus. They have some questions about your evening activities." The phone went dead. Marcus stared at the device, his mind racing. Police? Why would police be at their house? And why did Vivian sound so triumphant? For the first time since planning this murder, Marcus felt genuine fear. Something had gone terribly wrong. The perfect plan was unraveling, and he had no idea how or why. As he drove home through the dark streets of Westchester County, Marcus Wellington was about to discover that he had underestimated his wife in the most catastrophic way possible. The prey had become the predator, and the trap was about to close. Marcus Wellington pulled into his driveway at 12:23 a.m., his hands trembling as he turned off the engine. The sight that greeted him confirmed his worst fears. 3 police cars lined the street, their red and blue lights casting an ominous glow across the manicured lawn he had once taken such pride in. Detective Sarah Martinez met him at the front door, her expression professional but knowing. "Dr. Wellington, I'm Detective Martinez with the Westchester County Police. We need to speak with you about the events of this evening." Marcus's mind raced through possible explanations. Maybe Vivian had called police because she felt sick. Maybe she had discovered the affair and reported it as harassment. Maybe there had been a burglary. Anything but the truth, he was beginning to suspect. "Of course," Marcus said, trying to maintain his composure. "Is my wife all right? She sounded strange on the phone." "Your wife is perfectly fine," Detective Martinez replied. "In fact, she's been quite helpful in explaining tonight's events." As Marcus entered his own home, he felt like a stranger. The familiar surroundings now seemed hostile, threatening. Vivian sat calmly in the living room, flanked by 2 additional officers. She looked up as he entered, her expression serene, but her eyes holding a triumph that made his blood run cold. "Hello, Marcus," she said quietly. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." Detective Martinez gestured for Marcus to sit. "Dr. Wellington, we have some questions about your activities tonight. Specifically, about the substance you added to your wife's wine at approximately 7:15 p.m. Marcus felt the world tilt. "I don't know what you're talking about." Vivian reached for a tablet computer and turned it toward him. On the screen was crystal-clear footage of Marcus in their kitchen, carefully measuring digitalis into her wine glass. The timestamp showed 7:15 p.m., and the angle captured not just his actions, but his expression, cold, calculating, determined. "We have everything, Marcus," Vivian said, her voice steady. "Every conversation with Gabriella, every financial transaction, every moment of your planning. David Chen has been documenting your activities for months." Marcus stared at the screen, watching himself commit attempted murder in high definition. "This isn't... You were just trying to kill me," Vivian finished. "For money, for a woman who has been manipulating you from the beginning." Detective Martinez leaned forward. "Dr. Wellington, we've also been in contact with Ms. Gabriella Rossi. She's been very cooperative in explaining your joint planning sessions." The room seemed to spin. "Gabriella? What did she say?" "She told us everything," Detective Martinez replied. "About the planning, about the digitalis, about your discussions of how to spend the insurance money. She even provided recordings of your conversations." Marcus felt betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Gabriella had turned on him, had saved herself by destroying him completely. The woman he had risked everything for had been prepared to sacrifice him the moment she felt threatened. Vivian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the police cars. "You want to know the most beautiful part of this, Marcus? The wine you poisoned? I never actually drank it. I switched the glasses while you were taking that phone call. The wine you watched me drink was perfectly safe. But I saw you, Marcus stammered. You saw what I wanted you to see, Vivian replied. I've been acting for months, Marcus. Pretending I didn't know about Gabriella, pretending I didn't suspect your plans. I needed you to feel confident enough to actually attempt the murder. Detective Martinez placed a recording device on the table. We also have audio of your conversation with Ms. Rossi from this afternoon, where you discussed the timeline for tonight's events. Marcus listened in horror as his own voice filled the room. By midnight, she'll be dead, and we'll be free to start our new life together. The evidence was overwhelming. Hidden cameras throughout the house had captured weeks of suspicious behavior. Financial records showed the systematic theft of marital assets. Phone records revealed hundreds of calls between Marcus and Gabriella. Most damning of all, they had recorded Marcus's actual attempt to commit murder. Dr. Wellington, Detective Martinez said formally, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and aggravated fraud. As the handcuffs closed around his wrists, Marcus looked at Vivian one final time. The woman he had underestimated, dismissed and tried to murder, was now his destroyer. Why didn't you just divorce me? He asked, his voice broken. Vivian's response was ice cold. Because you tried to kill me, Marcus. You don't get to walk away from that. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. Marcus Wellington, respected physician and pillar of the community, was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder. His medical license was permanently revoked, and his reputation was destroyed completely. Gabriella Rossi received an 8-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder. Her cooperation with prosecutors had reduced her potential sentence, but she still faced significant prison time. More importantly, her betrayal of Marcus had been so complete that she had destroyed any chance of profiting from their scheme. The financial consequences were catastrophic for Marcus. Legal fees consumed what remained of his personal assets. The malpractice insurance company launched their own investigation, finding evidence of fraud that voided his coverage entirely. Patients began filing lawsuits, questioning whether a man capable of attempting murder could be trusted with their medical care. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was what Vivian did with the fortune she had saved and protected. She established the Vivian Wellington Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence and financial abuse. The foundation provided legal assistance, financial counseling, and safety resources for people trapped in dangerous relationships. Marcus spent months planning to steal everything I had built, Vivian said during the foundation's inaugural press conference. Instead, he gave me the opportunity to use our resources to help people facing similar threats. The Foundation's first initiative was a program called Trust Your Instincts, which educated people about recognizing warning signs in relationships. Vivian became a powerful advocate for financial literacy, teaching people to maintain awareness of their household finances as a form of self-protection. The case became a cautionary tale that resonated far beyond Westchester County. Here was a respected professional who had thrown away everything for greed and lust, only to be outsmarted by the woman he had tried to eliminate. The story served as a reminder that intelligence, determination, and careful planning could triumph over even the most calculated evil. Marcus Wellington, once a healer who commanded respect and trust, would spend the next 2 decades in prison, his legacy forever defined by the night he tried to murder his wife. The man who had sworn to do no harm had learned the hardest lesson of all: underestimate people at your own peril. Vivian Wellington had turned her greatest betrayal into her greatest triumph. The Wellington case teaches us lessons that could save lives, marriages, and fortunes. As we close this shocking story, let's examine the critical takeaways that every viewer needs to understand. First and most importantly, trust your instincts. They're often right. Vivian noticed changes in Marcus's behavior months before he acted on his murderous plan. She didn't dismiss her concerns or rationalize away the warning signs. When something felt wrong, she investigated. How many tragedies could be prevented if people listened to that inner voice telling them something isn't right? Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship? Maybe your partner became secretive about their phone, started working late without explanation, or began showing unusual interest in your finances. These behaviors might seem innocent individually, but together they can indicate serious deception. Vivian's story shows us that paying attention to these patterns isn't paranoia, it's survival. Second, financial awareness can literally save your life. Vivian's meticulous attention to their credit card statements revealed the affair that led to the murder plot. She knew where every dollar went, understood their investments, and maintained control over their financial future. This knowledge didn't just protect their money, it protected her life. Do you know where your family's money is invested? Can you access your accounts independently? Are you aware of unusual spending patterns? Financial ignorance makes you vulnerable to both fraud and physical danger. Marcus counted on Vivian being uninformed about their finances, but her awareness became his downfall. Third, never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. Marcus saw Vivian as a weak, aging woman who could be easily eliminated. He failed to recognize that she had built their fortune, managed complex financial portfolios, and possessed the intelligence to outmaneuver him completely. When someone threatens everything you've worked for, you discover strength you never knew existed. Finally, beware the danger in seemingly perfect relationships. The Wellingtons appeared to have an ideal marriage, successful, wealthy, respected in their community. But perfection is often a mask hiding serious problems. The most dangerous betrayals come from people we trust completely, people who know our routines, our vulnerabilities, and our secrets. Would you have handled this situation differently? Some might argue that Vivian should have confronted Marcus directly or gone to police immediately. But her methodical approach gathered irrefutable evidence and prevented Marcus from destroying evidence or fleeing with Gabriella. Her patience and planning ensured justice was served completely. The Wellington case reminds us that evil can wear a respected face, that greed can corrupt even those sworn to heal, and that intelligence and determination can triumph over calculated malice. But it also shows us that we have more power than we realize to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Vivian Wellington could have been a victim, but she chose to be a survivor. Her story continues helping others through her foundation, turning her personal nightmare into a beacon of hope for people facing similar threats. What lessons did you take from Vivian's story? Did this case change how you think about trust, relationships, or financial security? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives on these cases. If you found this story as shocking as I did, please subscribe to True Crime Journal HQ and hit that notification bell. We bring you the most compelling cases that reveal the complexity of human nature and the triumph of justice over evil. Share this video if it made you think differently about relationships, trust, or the importance of staying aware of warning signs. Your sharing helps these important stories reach people who might need to hear them. And don't forget to check out our playlist of similar cases where intelligence defeated evil, where victims became victors, and where justice prevailed against all odds. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, trust your instincts. They might save your life.